At St. Louis Acura, our customer-focused approach keeps earning us more inventory. As others increase their fees and take advantage of limited inventory, we keep our prices low because we remain committed to becoming better than ever and treating you as we want to be treated. We want you coming back and sending your friends and family to a veteran-owned, family-based business you can trust. Blessings for a wonderful holiday season and a prosperous new year from our families to yours. St. Louis Acura, better than ever for you.
Hey, welcome back into Weekend Joe, driven by Munganess St. Louis Acura, Munganess Alton Toyota here on ClavesOnline.com. Time now to talk a little Blues hockey and just NHL in general, because like every other sport, things are just getting crazier and crazier. So now we welcome in. He is the former puck daddy, now with ESPN. He's Greg Wyshynski. What's going on, Greg? How's it been? How's it going?
It's been going good, man. I mean, living the rights holder life, and having a good time doing it. I mean, it's amazing when you can go from basically like 4 friends at a company that all love hockey and cover it on a daily basis to like 140. So it's been pretty fun to see.
As you watch the growth now of hockey with the new TV deals this season so far, as we're 2.5 months into it, how different does it look compared to previous seasons?
I mean, personally, I think it's a hell of a lot better. But that's just like my bias, inherent bias. No, here's what I'll say. Well, first of all, it's been really exciting as a guy who's been at ESPN for 4 years, but then also someone who's been a hockey fan all his life, to see what coverage of the game looks like when my company throws its resources behind it. Not only in the innovation that you see in the broadcast, but in, getting the great people to cover the game, like Ray Ferraro, who I'm so excited is part of the family. And then, developing all the programming that we've developed, like The Point, our Thursday show, which is an hour-long hockey show, which we've never had in the US before on a weekly basis on a major network. So seeing that has been exhilarating, but more to the point, and I've always said this, just having hockey in 2 places is exhilarating. It never made sense to me, and this is not a knock on NBC's coverage or anything, but it never made sense to me to have a monolithic television contract where it's all on one station, and then occasionally on the regular NBC for certain events. Never made sense to me. Like, we should be trying to reach new audiences and broader audiences, and so the fact that, like, if you're watching AEW wrestling, the next thing you see is an NHL game on TNT. And if you're watching, our Sports Center or college basketball coverage, whatever, it'll then lead into the NHL. And so you're giving these new audiences a taste of what the product is, and hopefully they stick around and find something they like. And it's such an exciting time to be a U.S. hockey fan because of all these opportunities to broaden the tent, which is what we should always be striving to do as hockey fans.
I was just about to bring up the wrestling thing, the AEW thing, because you're talking about the Turner side, the ESPN and the Turner side of the new TV deal. Because right now, I don't know what the center of the hockey and wrestling Venn diagram looks like. I don't know how big that is. But for somebody like you and I, it's very easy to see that right now, with the way the deal is that they're showing a lot of West Coast games. And for those that don't know, AEW is moving to TBS in the new year, and that's probably going to open up a lot of East Coast games. And I can't imagine what the ratings boost is going to be for hockey fans on Turner once that happens. And I don't know if that's really well known right now.
Yeah, it's going to be cool. And I think that Venn diagram is it's like hockey and then wrestling, and then like Chris Jericho and the Goon are in the middle. The Goon, for those who may not know, it was an actual, back when the WWF would create wrestlers based on occupations, like Duke the Dumpster Drosy, who was a wrestling garbage man, and Sparky Plug, who was a wrestling NASCAR driver. The Goon was a wrestling hockey player whose wrestling boots were actually fashioned to look like skates. And he would hit people with sticks and stuff, and it didn't really last all that long, but they tried it.
I think as this has really gone off the rails in a hurry, I really think that as far as professional wrestlers go, I think that there's a lot of them that are huge hockey fans, maybe more than any sport. When you look at the amount of wrestlers that are based in Nashville that are big fans, the amount of wrestlers that have been based down in Florida that have the Lightning down there and that have hockey down there. And then you look at the stars that you mentioned, Jericho, but look at some of the other ones that are Canadian that have a love of hockey, a Sami Zayn, a Kevin Owens. And then, we're celebrating, today is the 16th. It's Brody Lee's birthday. I know he was a huge hockey fan too, a huge Penguins fan, I believe. So there is a huge amount of wrestling fandom, I think, just in the locker rooms for the companies.
Well, for hell, Bret Hart owned a team. There was the Calgary Hitmen. They wore pink. I mean, there's a long legacy here of hockey wrestling. By the way, for those who don't know, one of the biggest wrestling fans in the National Hockey League is actually Bruce Boudreau, the head coach now of the Vancouver Canucks. He and I have spent many moments after a practice talking about, Ric Flair or the Stampede territory or things like that. He is an old school wrestling guy. I don't know how hip he is to the current product, but was a guy who I bonded with over a mutual admiration for the squared circle, as it were.
Before we move on, do you think Brock Lesnar can skate?
I mean, the thing about wrestlers and hockey was always the notion of, could you put the biggest wrestler and make him a goalie? Kind of like that sumo wrestler test that one of those like Mythbusters show did once. Like, could you take, in his heyday, King Kong Bundy or somebody and make him into a goaltender? And I don't know if they would necessarily have the mobility. I'll tell you who would have had the mobility. Vader would have had the mobility, and maybe Bam Bam Bigelow, the guy who weighed probably like 350 and then could do cartwheels, probably had the mobility to be a goaltender. And the girth.
It's all about the skating that would probably do them in, and being able to just stand there, especially for a goalie, being able to stand there on skates.
Yeah, goalies have to be pretty good skaters. It's kind of an underrated part of the position. If you talk to goalie coaches, they'll talk about the ability to, move quickly across the crease and what their push is and things like that. It's one of the reasons why I loved, albeit briefly, the goalie races that they used to have in the skills competition for a couple of seasons. Like, I'm all about trying to educate people to understand the athleticism inherent in playing goalie in this league. And it's not just like find a guy that fits the chest protector and can drop down occasionally to block a shot. It is an amazingly athletic position. And I wish there was more done to really kind of highlight the athleticism of those guys.
So let's talk goalies, and let's get into the St. Louis Blues, who we're seeing now. We're seeing in the NFL, we're seeing in the NBA and the NHL. We're seeing all these teams get hit with the new variant of COVID-19, and you're seeing the teams in Canada kind of are already announcing they're going to go 50% capacity in some of the arenas. But the Blues have been just struggling for the entire month of December right now. Jordan Binnington's been out, but I think he was just taken off the COVID list. Charlie Lindgren, though, has come on along with the emergency backup goal. It's just been a mess here in St. Louis, but it seems like Craig Berube has handled things really, really well over the last 2.5 weeks here with the Blues.
Yeah, I mean, get a goalie with sideburns, I guess, is probably the first trick to maintaining your success. But yeah, the fact that they've been able to kind of navigate through this as well as they have and pick up victories and pick up points has been pretty remarkable considering what their lineup is missing. And Berube's an interesting case. I've traveled a bit in the last few weeks, including to the Board of Governors meeting in Florida, and there was a perception of maybe his tenure being a little bit tenuous in St. Louis. Like, if things didn't go a certain way, he kind of had his run. Maybe they go with a different voice, that type of thing. But if there's one constant with him as head coach, it's been his ability to get his team through adversity, right? Like, we think about the Cup run and the incredible, maybe the best virtue that team had of forgetting about the problems they had in previous games or the miscarriages of justice they had in previous games, and just kind of push forward, and keep winning and keep playing with the way they play. And I think that that's a virtue that you could even see in this season now, where it doesn't matter who's in the lineup. It doesn't matter who's out of the lineup. It doesn't matter if they're banged up or if they have COVID or, when they're coming back. You don't know when they're coming back. Just put your head down and play the way we know we can play and get results. And for the most part, he's been able to get that out of this team despite having a real piecemeal lineup at times.
And in doing so, you look at some of the other adversity that happened before the season started with Vladimir Tarasenko just the other night, 3 more points for him. And the rumblings have still been there about him not wanting to be in St. Louis. And maybe by the time the season's over with, he's on the move, but it doesn't seem to be affecting his play. Have you heard anything, or what's your view on where he finishes the season?
Yeah, no, the last thing I heard was before the season, and then, he didn't move, and then he started playing and leading the team in scoring, and then the team obviously has succeeded as well. So I feel like there's probably some sort of if it ain't broke, don't fix it agreement between him and management right now. I do think that the season he's having is beneficial for all parties. One of the reasons why he's still a member of the Blues is because you had teams that were hesitant about taking on his contract, not knowing what shape he was going to be and not knowing if he could stay in the lineup. I mean, my goodness, he was available for the pickings in the expansion draft and didn't go. So it's interesting that things worked out the way they did, but in the long run, it may work out for the best for everybody involved, because there'll be more of a marketplace for him if he wants to leave. And the Blues will get a bit of better return for him if, in fact, this is a temporary piece between the two, or they decide, hey, bygones are bygones, and we can make this thing work.
And we'll see now over the next few weeks as hopefully the Blues get healthier and I guess maybe get active would be the right word, get off of the COVID list to see just how everything continues to mesh and see how they move forward. You're seeing these lists grow and grow. We know that there's a break coming in the schedule with the Olympics. Do you see anything happening before then with the NHL, maybe stopping it a week before just to get everybody off this list and ready to restart once the Olympics are over?
I mean, anything's possible. I know that that's not something they're really hoping they have to do, if only because they know that they're going to have a lot of games they need to make up, and then they would just be creating more that they need to make up that they might not have to postpone. I think the league is pretty happy just forging ahead and trying to reschedule these games as they come. But it bears observing that you do have some players now, Nick Cousins of the Predators being one of them, who are saying, maybe we should shut this down for a little bit. This is kind of getting out of hand. And, you're seeing teams that are playing without their goaltenders. You're seeing teams that are playing without their coaches. And so there are thresholds internally in the NHL insofar as when they'll pull the cord and shut down a team. But some teams haven't reached that threshold of how many guys are out of the lineup. So it's going to be interesting to see if they actually go and do pause the season, because I think there's a couple things here. One, like I said, it's do we need to cancel games or postpone games that we don't necessarily feel like we need to postpone? And the other thing is, I mean, it ain't like we shut this thing down and the variant's going away. I mean, this is going to be months, probably until the weather really warms up before we're out of the woods on this thing. And I don't know necessarily what good it does to shut it down if we're just going to come back into the same mess that we're in right now.
What is this going to end up doing to the Olympics? Can you see any NHL players going to the Olympics at this point with the 3 to 5 weeks quarantine in place and all the other rules that China has put in?
I think a lot will go.
Really?
I think many. Oh yeah, I think many will go if given the chance. You're really dealing with two separate issues here. You're dealing with, will the NHL allow them to go? And the only reason they wouldn't allow them to go, because they've committed to allowing them to go in the collective bargaining agreement for this Olympics and the next one, is if they have to use the Olympic break to make up some games. Now, one problem is that there isn't a lot of dates to use to make up these games. You look at places like Madison Square Garden and Staples Center, they lost a lot of money in the last year and a half. So they've used this Olympic break to book all of the Casey Musgraves concerts and Elton John concerts, and Staples Center's got 3 days of Super Bowl concerts with like No Doubt and Green Day. So like these places have really booked up, and the availability of dates to use these arenas to move games up from later in the season or make up games that have been postponed is going to be difficult. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But if the NHL has enough games they postpone, they say, hey, we have to use this time to make up the games, then they have it within the agreement to say you guys can't go. The other issue is if the players will opt not to go. And here's what you're hearing behind the scenes. You're hearing guys that are like, I don't like the protocols that are in place in China, being constricted to what is a closed loop system. They can't go and see the city. They have to kind of just go from the Olympic Village to the transportation to the arena, then back again. So it's not going to be your typical Olympic experience. They don't like the quarantine part of it, which is that if they get sick over there and they test positive and they have symptoms, they could be stuck in Beijing for what the NHLPA is telling them could be 3 to 5 weeks beyond the Olympics. That's a long time in a foreign country away from your loved ones. And you don't get paid for the time that you miss in the National Hockey League. There's a $5 million fund the IIHF has for these players that lose salary because they got sick. But $5 million ain't a whole lot if you're dealing with a massive outbreak, right? So they're worried about that. That said, it's a chance to represent your country. It's a chance to try to win a medal. You hear players, even the ones that are young enough to do this again in a few years, talk about it being a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And the players I've talked to, and a lot of the players that you're seeing talk about the Olympics, they get right to that line where they say, I don't know if we could do this, but only 2 of them so far, Robin Lehner and Erik Carlson. Erik Carlson, who, by the way, has been in the Olympics and had a lot of success there, have said, I'm not going to go. And even in Carlson's case, he said, probably not going to go. But a lot of the other guys have just kind of got up there being like, I don't know how we could do this, but none of them said, but I'm not going. Because at the end of the day, the draw of representing your country is that strong. And don't forget about this too. I wrote about this in my column this week on ESPN.com. The peer pressure involved is tough. You think about like how many guys opted out of the bubble playoffs, and how many guys opted out of last season, how many guys didn't get the vaccine. We're talking single digits, right? That's because like you're part of the team and it's the hockey culture thing. And if all the guys from Team Russia are going, you don't want to be the one Russian guy that's not going. If all the guys in Team USA are like, hey, this is our best chance to beat Canada, you don't want to be the American guy being like, I'm just going to stay home. Like there's a certain amount of that going on too. And I wonder if it's going to be strong enough to overcome the doubts that they have about their safety over there.
As somebody that covers the game every day for a living, it's stuff like this just fascinating to you that you get to write about this instead of what happens on the ice? Well,
take a drink here. I just went for a run before. I got into running when I moved to California for a couple of years, and it's my time to listen to podcasts and go running, but it also leaves me parched because I don't take water with me when I run.
Yeah.
I find it to be cumbersome.
It's tough. So, it's tough to do. It really is.
I used to have like a little plastic size. No, I'm back in Brooklyn now, but okay. I was in San Jose for like 2 years. And so during the pandemic, no less, is when I go out and go running and stuff and kind of got into it. And but I'm not like Chris Johnston from the Toronto Star, who's run for like 600 days straight or some such. But it's a nice break. It's a nice mental break. But anyway, that's why I'm parched. To answer your question, no, I hate it. It sucks to have to write about this. It was interesting when it was a story about logistics and could they pull it off, and what did the players think about going to the bubble after the season shut down, and how are they going to bring the teams back? They expanded the playoffs. Like there was a ton of really unprecedented stuff that was happening 2 years ago. Or was it last year? Whatever the hell it was. Now it's like a bad rerun. It's like Groundhog Day. It's like, we did this before. We did the arenas are capping capacity and the players are all testing positive and they're all leaving the lineups. And it's not even like the same vibe as it was last year, because the NHL isn't releasing the numbers of players that are on the COVID list or who's on the COVID list. It's almost like we were really trying to approach the season as having gotten through it, which was probably very naive. But now that we haven't gotten through it, it's just a big bummer rather than being like really interesting insofar as like what protocols they'll do, because they don't have an answer. I mean, that's the worst part about this. Like, if it was like a science fiction novel where all the scientists were running around trying to figure out what to do to get the cure and we can go play hockey games again, like that'd be one thing. But right now it's kind of like no one really knows what to do, especially the players. Like the players are all like, we got vaccinated. You wanted us to get vaccinated, we got vaccinated. Most of us aren't getting sick. And even the NHL said the other week, the guys aren't getting severely ill like they were last season. So you talk to the boys and they're just like, what do you want us to do? Like, you know, the asymptomatic guys, like you have players in this league who, by the way, are not epidemiologists, who are saying, shouldn't the asymptomatic guys be able to play? And that's kind of like the mindset right now. So it's kind of like the interesting, panicky story of what will the league do was a couple seasons back. And now that we're in this thing again, it's sort of just like depressing that we're going to have to probably hunker down and figure out a way to soldier through a season that I think a lot of us were hoping would have a sense of normalcy.
And with the NHL too, different than every other sport, is the amount of teams you have up in Canada. And it seems like Canada, I mean, we saw that they're starting to shut stuff down again. And this isn't like last year where you just had the Canadian teams just up there doing their own thing. There are players, I mean, there are teams crossing the border now every single day. And if it continues to get worse at some point, it's going to become an even bigger mess.
Yeah, and it's one of the things I was just talking to an executive about the other day, which is that it's all become so fragmented, right? So even if we start to see some of these localities, and keep in mind that like the reason the league shut down when the outbreak happened wasn't because the NHL is like, we have to be proactive. It's because you had municipalities saying you can't play games. Like, we're not going to allow you indoors, even the players, to do this anymore. And so when that happened, they shut everything down. So you're dealing with a very fractured continent right now insofar as how Canada handles things, how California handles things, how New York handles things versus how Texas, Florida handle things, right? So it's going to be really fascinating to see how this whole thing plays out, because, I mean, I don't think there are going to be any capacity caps coming to Lightning and Panther games anytime soon. I think they might like add seats to Lightning and Panther games before they take them away, considering how that state's being run. So it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out, if the NHL is going to rely on the localities to really drive the policy on all this stuff.
So back to the Blues, with everything that has hit them the past 2.5 weeks, can you at all give an idea of how good this team might be? I mean, they will not go away. They keep winning games. They keep getting points. Can you tell where they kind of fall in line in the Western Conference?
Yeah, I think they're really good. I remember when they were more at full strength, thinking to myself, we really missed the boat here. I remember I had them in a tier in our previews and our like contender tiers, that right there with the Washington Capitals as being like teams that won cups recently, and then we just kind of forgot about it. We're like, all right, they won. Like, it's impossible that they'll win again. You know what I mean? And we slept on them a little bit. Like, there were a whole lot of people picking. I picked the Caps to miss the playoffs. I was very wrong about that. They're very good. The Blues I picked to make the playoffs, but I certainly didn't think that they'd be a cup contender. But at full strength, I kind of believe that we might be looking at a team that could really make a run of it if they can all kind of click at the same time. If Kyrou continues to do what he's done, and add that element to it, if the acquisitions that Doug Armstrong made in the offseason continue to make the difference that they've made in Sada Buchnevich, I mean, there's a lot to really like about this team. It does eventually come down to whether Jordan Binnington can win in the playoffs, which hasn't happened in 3 years. But you hope that he can. And if he does, then they might be a team you really have to watch out for.
Is that a Whalers cap that you're rocking?
This is a whale bone cap.
Ah.
It's a clothing company, I believe, based in the Hamptons. But it's also like got a W on it, which people think could stand for Wyshynski, which I think is very, like, I don't know, like a little bit hubristic of me to wear a hat with my initial on it. But I think it's a cool hat too.
It's all about branding. It's all about getting your name out there, and yeah.
It is about branding, but it also kind of makes me a little Wario adjacent, which is not necessarily what you want.
Well, Greg, thank you so much for taking the time, talking hockey, wrestling, and everything else that we've covered over the last half hour or so. I really appreciate it, man, and look forward to catching up down the road, hopefully around playoff time.
You got it. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.